Now to the increasing levels of violence here in Nigeria, one of the many challenges that the country's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will have to tackle. Today, he attended the funeral of 17 Nigerian soldiers killed earlier this month in the Okuama community in the southern state of Delta. We're looking at live pictures there, and they were all there. Those soldiers in Delta State were there on a peace mission to settle a quarrel between the Okuama and the Okoloba communities when they were attacked. Their killers are yet to be apprehended. And in a polarized Nigeria, there is a tangle of angry voices for and against the military action that's been taking place in Delta State. President Tinubu has been speaking at that funeral, trying to reset the tempo at a very somber event here in Abuja. Let's take a moment to listen in.
Signifies the beginning of new life for our departed dearly beloved colleagues. Next on our program is the vote of thanks. May I request the Chief of Administration.
And that's the funeral of 17 Nigerian soldiers killed earlier this month in the Okuama community in the southern state of Delta. It's that funeral taking place here in Abuja. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the security analyst and retired U.S. Army Captain Bish Johnson. Mr. Johnson, thank you very much indeed for joining us. A very somber event here in Abuja.
That's very correct. That's the most solemn duty any commander-in-chief is going to have to perform.
And what do we know so far about this attack and the attempt to arrest the perpetrators?
Well, I don't have any particular information as an individual as to, what led to the attack, and also the effort that the military has made so far in order to apprehend the individuals. But I know that based from experience, when incident of this nature happens, the military always has their priority objectives. And one of the first priority objectives is to recover the bodies of their slain colleagues, after which they will have to seek for lost sensitive items. And this is when the threat has been neutralized. And the only way to neutralize that threat is to find the perpetrators of that, carnage and neutralize them, recover weapons from them to make sure they are not still posing threat to the military or any individual in that area. So I would presume that is probably what the Nigerian military is trying to do.
It sounds like it's a very complex, that there is a complex story behind the killing of these soldiers in Delta State.
Yes, there has been multiple stories of, why they were there and, how they got involved and why they shouldn't have been involved. Charles, we'll be having this conversation in Nigeria as to what the actual role of the Nigerian military has to be in a civil space. And it's a conversation that we ought to continue to have. Because if you ask me, I would say that, look, we are using our military services in many ways that we ought not to have been using them. And so the military has been stretched so far thin because they are spread across all over the country, performing what ordinarily ought to be the duties of the Nigerian police. I'm thinking that Nigerians, this is the time. This incident should be a time that will, take some step back and begin to, reconsider some of the responsibilities that we have saddled the military, our armed forces with, and see how we can have that conversation to rejig the whole system and let the police do their job. Because there is a difference between soldiering and policing. To me, I feel that that peacekeeping mission ought to have been done better by the Nigerian police. I'm not saying that if the police had been there, that the threat wouldn't have been there. But that is their jurisdiction, that is their field.
Right. Well, given that you brought that up, obviously many international observers have been wondering what the police are doing and why this security situation that should be their province has not only been taken away from them, but has got this bad. What is your assessment of that?
Well, if you see, this is a very complex problem in this country, and it would be very unfair for me to sit here and simplify it just by providing one singular answer. The truth of the matter is that the Nigerian police has been underfunded for a very long period of time. And when you have decades and decades and decades of underfunding, forget about what you see, in the annual budget. They don't fund those budgets up to 50%. So they have been underfunded for decades, and therefore created a very big deficit in terms of capacity of the Nigerian police to be able to police such a large country as Nigeria. So it's going to take a very radical and aggressive step and measures to be able to bridge that gap that has been created in terms of capacity.
And of course that gap includes training, and,
not just
discipline, and
exactly,
all the rest.
exactly, training, welfare, payment, morale, and all of those things. So it's going to take very aggressive measures to be able to close that gap and be able to improve their capacity to be able to police the entire country. This is a very vast country, not just in terms of population, but quite in terms of land mass. It's a very reasonable, large country that we need more than the number of police that we have now. And that is why some of us have been very, very acute proponents of state policing. Because I, as a person, had come to the realization, and even the former vice president, Professor Yemi Osibanjo, even alluded to that fact that securing this country is far more beyond the responsibility of the federal government, and the federal government alone cannot fund it. And I agree with him. So we have to find a way to decentralize, particularly policing. In fact, remove policing from our constitution, legislate on it, because the security situation continues to evolve. It's not static, it's dynamic.
Right, but there are dangers inherent in that.
Out
there, which is why there's some reluctance to do it.
There is danger in everything that we do in our lives.
But particularly in this case, given Nigeria's history,
yes,
it's
with
the civil war and all the rest of it.
I agree with you. There are some, in everything that you have pros, there will always be cons to it. I agree with you. But that's just like saying that, look, because people flew airplane and they crashed, therefore, nobody should fly aeroplane again. Aeroplane still remains one of the safest means of transportation. Based on the enormity of the security situation we have in the country right now, it's very important, and that's why I say we have to have that conversation to get that state, those who support it, the reasons why they are supporting it, and those who are opposed to it.
Right.
We have all of them laid side by side and see which one outweighs.
Well, obviously, you talk about the enormity of the security problem here beyond the attack of these particular soldiers on them. Soldiers were watching their funeral earlier. There have been lots of other attacks on security personnel, as well as Nigerian civilians, and clearly stopping that violence is one of the challenges facing the Tinubu government. What's your assessment of how it's being tackled so far?
Well, so far, if you look at what is happening right now so far, I don't think anything has changed security-wise since the former President Muhammad Buhari left office and now. And I am not one of those people that like to assess people, within a short period of time. I like to give administrations because governance is complicated, it's complex. So I like to give people that benefit of doubt, give them some time to put in policies in place, before we begin to assess them. So I'm thinking personally that it's too early for us to begin to assess, particularly the security situation in the country. But I can tell you that nothing has changed positively. Instead, the situation is getting worse because there is hardly any day that you don't get one kind of sad news. Either civilians are killed or service members are killed or students are kidnapped from their schools. These are the stories that we all live with on a daily basis.
Right. So a vicious cycle of violence that Nigeria appears to be trapped in. Is there a clear way out, or you don't see this?
Well, this is not a problem that this country that came overnight. So there is not going to be an overnight solution to it. What is going
but
to
when you say overnight, I mean, this same discussion has been going on for decades.
Sure.
So clearly that's not overnight, is it?
It's not overnight.
And
when
there's
you
still no solution.
Yes, it's not overnight when you look at government holistically as being continuous. Now, but if you look at those who are seated in power right now, you can say that they don't have the magic stick to fix that problem. They're going to have to fix this problem is going to have to require a very determined approach. Not just, it may not even be fixed in one term of a president. Right. It may not even be fixed in one presidency, but we have to be moving in the right direction. And the only way we can be moving in that right direction is if this administration, forget about the past administration, the buck stops right now on the desk of President
But are you seeing any signs that it's moving in the right direction?
As long as we continue to get all this bad news every day, I don't think anything has changed.
In that context, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, do you think it's time for the law to start allowing people to carry firearms to protect themselves and their property, because clearly the government can't protect them?
Oh, sure, there is always a contract between the states and the citizens, where the states gave up their right to bear arms, where the citizens gave up their right to bear arms in order for the state to provide security for them. But that contract seemed to have been broken. Now, there's been that temptation for us to say, look, let's allow everybody to bear arms in this country. But I can tell you that, look, it will be a bloodbath in Nigeria if you allow Nigerians to bear arms. If Nigerians bear arms, what is happening in Nigeria today will be a child's play compared to the level of insecurity that is going to take place in this country if everybody is carrying weapons. What is happening in the United States is a joke. So I don't think we should have that type of Second Amendment in Nigeria where every Nigerian bears arms.
But some would argue that that's the same thing that would happen if you create state and local government police in this country.
Not quite, because the state police or local government police are going to be regulated. I am not one of those advocates who want a wild west kind of state police or local police where everybody is going to do whatever they want. We have to sit down, come up with guidelines, on how states can have their own police, what kind of weapons they will have, right, what kind of offenses they will be able to investigate. No, it shouldn't be a wild west. It should be something that is controlled, where the guidelines are set ahead of time before any state or local government is allowed to have their own police. So you can't compare it with a situation where 200 and something million Nigerians are carrying.
Not everybody's going to carry guns.
Well, so if you say that
you have to meet certain criteria, obviously, to be able to bear arms.
Yeah, sure, but many more people are going to meet that criteria, and many more people are going to bear arms. And you can't compare it to the situation where you have state-owned security outfits that will be vetted, controlled, regulated, bearing arms. You can't compare those two situations. We are calling for anarchy. If we are opening up individuals, every citizen, as long as you're qualified, go and get your own weapon. So it will be, what we are seeing now will be a joke.
I think you have a point there, but the big fear is the irresponsibility of Nigerian politicians, because a lot of the violence in this country is politically motivated. It's sometimes fueled by politicians, and there's ample evidence of that. And there is concern that if you give them the power to create and control state police, that you could really have, something a lot worse than what we're seeing in terms of political violence in this country today.
Well, you see, I gave you one analogy that you can't, because plane crashed, Therefore, people should no longer fly. You see, the longest amount of time any governor will be in office is 8 years. After that, he's a private citizen. So whatever crime he committed while in office, they can go after him for those crimes. Okay? So, but the security challenges that we face today is so humongous, is so enormous, that only the federal government alone cannot adequately deal with it. And let me tell you, Charles, one of the tenets of democracy is when you ask the people to go and govern themselves, you must also allow those people to secure themselves. You see, right now, you cannot hold any governor to account for any breakdown of law and order in their state. Forget about the fact Constitution says, they are the chief security officers of their state. They are not. In principle, they are. In practice, they are not.
Right, okay.
Now, so if we give them state police, controlled, regulated by the federal government, and there's a breakdown of law and order in their jurisdiction, the federal government can hold that governor to account because that governor is responsible for law and order in his jurisdiction.
Okay.
And where he fails to do that, he can be held to account.
Captain Bish Johnson, very, very delighted to have you here and have the benefit of your analysis. You clearly know your eggs there. Thank you very much indeed. Captain Bish Johnson is a retired U.S. Army captain and is also a security analyst.